I'm here with Dr. Blake Ambridge, a good friend of mine. He's been in practice for over 35 years. I knew him when I was first lecturing in Northern California. I met him, and then I just saw what a class act he was. And he's always looking to do the best thing for his patients. And we went over many, many files when I was visiting back and forth and having many discussions about cases. And I wanted to bring on someone who's actually done it, who's done it multiple times, has built a successful practice, and has been in the trenches. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Didier, anytime.
So tell me, from like when you started, you graduated school, you started your practice. Tell us about what you learned there, what kind of suggestions you would give, but just the concept of starting a practice. Now, in our group, we have new people and we have experienced people, but let's just spend a little bit of time for people that are new and they're trying to get their practice going, or they've been in practice for several years. They just have not been able to take it to the next level. We have all those things that are happening with real life practices.
Uh-huh.
So what happened when you were new? What kind of suggestions would you have for that new development of a practice? What do you suggest?
Well, I my experience may be unique in today's world, because as I look at the newer doctors coming out, I think there's a different perspective that they might have. Back in the day when I started, there were no real clinics you could go work for. So you pretty much had to come out practicing for yourself. And I think most of the people coming to Karrazin Institute are probably those types of individuals as well. They're already in practice for themselves versus working for someone else. But I wanted to have control of what I was able to do with my patients. And so what I began to do was just connect with people in any which way I could. So I offered services, complimentary things. I kept my overhead low so that I didn't get too strung out financially. And I tried to always over deliver for my patient. In other words, whatever I was charging, whatever they had to spend, they got more than what they really spent for.
Okay.
So that was a kind of a philosophy I always had.
There's a few things you said I want to focus on a little bit. One of them was new graduates. So I've seen new graduates over the past 20 years. You've seen them over the past 35 years. They're different, right? And
yeah.
And what I'm noticing is they're better trained, but at the same time, they're way more cocky. And it's like they misunderstand, like, just because they know information that they're going to be good in practice, but it's like you don't have real clinical skills, you don't have experience, you don't know how to put the stuff together, just reading a lot. And one of the mistakes I think new practitioners make is they go, well, I know so much more than my faculty. Well, that doesn't mean anything. It does not. It's not real. And so that's what I've noticed. What have you noticed between the newer grad the past 35 years?
Well, I had the privilege, I'll call it a privilege, but I relocated and began a new practice here in Northern Idaho. And so that was like 6 years ago, maybe 7. And I had to go take the Part 4 national boards, which didn't exist when I got my license. And so I was the old guy in the room in the testing, in the practical. Right. And so I got to listen to people around me, and they were young doctors coming out. And I found that they had a lot of uncertainty about going into practice. They felt a lot of risk. They felt a lot of pressure, and they were kind of wondering whether they should actually do that or just go work for, some, whatever these chain groups are or whatever that do chiropractic or whatever. This can apply to any discipline. But I think there's just a different thought process about that. And I think it's so powerful when you get information and you learn, but you've got to start applying it. And then your successes with your cases is what gives you kind of clinical confidence.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of stand behind that and just continue to forge forward and just be wise about the things you do. But I think that you may be right on that kind of confidence or cockiness attitude, but we've both been in practice, and you have things that don't always go right. They don't go exactly the way you were hoping. And you say, okay, well, I thought I was bright, but I guess I missed the mark on that. And so you go back and you start digging.
Right. Yep. And, it's actually really exciting to see the new grads because they are so much more skilled. They're so much focused on understanding research and knowing the mechanisms and not just randomly going to things. So that's been great.
Yeah.
Just that apprehension is also a real thing of knowing when to start and what to do. Then you have those that are in practice that, they started their practice, but they've never really been able to have it be secure. And, like they're good clinicians. Doesn't matter what their specialty is, they're good clinicians. They're always struggling to get new patients and they're always playing this game. And, when you first start, like no one knows you. You can be very talented and be great, but no one knows you. I remember when I was starting, I had a friend of mine, and we had a part-time office in a gym, and we would do classes every single week. We'd have a different topic, and we were able to post our class topic in the bathrooms. So
Yeah.
we would have a room they would let us use.
Trapped audience. Yeah.
And it was just we would have like a talk on, hey, diabetes or chronic fatigue or pain or something, and then we would get some people that would roll. We would do an hour talk on it, and that would be a way for us to kind of get introduced to patient population that were interested in what we're doing. What did you find was most successful for you when you were starting your practice, and also when your practice started, going to the next level where you're more secure? Were you doing health talks? How are you getting information out there?
Yeah, I met with groups. I offered different types of ways to lecture about things. And, our world is so informed now with the access to the internet and information, whether that's right or wrong information. And people are hungry for the information.
Yeah.
I still today I'm not getting to it, but I would still like to be helping my community understand certain things about health. And I'm just a little busier than I planned. And so I haven't mapped that out yet, but people love that information. And the other thing is that they identify right away if they connect with you.
Yep.
And I find that this is something I think you've always demonstrated really well. You can take a class from lots of people, but I would say one of your gifts is that you're just real and you're genuine and you're not super proprietary. You are willing to share. And that is kind of unique in the world of educating healthcare professionals. Most people hold something back, they don't share, whatever, and you've never been that way, but patients or prospective patients feel the same way. They can tell if you care. They know right away if you're doing it for money or if you're doing it because you are interested in the patient and helping them see a different way and have better health and quality of life. So if you can have that as your priority when you go to speak, they'll connect. People are looking. And you might have one or two people out there. Now, I know people educate and say the magic way to sign up 8 out of 14 people that come to your lecture. I mean, I wouldn't never say that I was an expert at all that or had any tricky ways that got somebody to sign up. But I think there's some smarter ways than others, get their information, put them on your mailer list. But I think that was one of the main ways I did that. I also went around to certain communities, groups, whether it's sometimes seniors, and I offered certain services, blood pressure checks and whatever. But it gave me a chance to connect with people. And if they can trust you, they have issues. They're just, if they wouldn't be there if they didn't have issues. And if they were being resolved, they wouldn't be there. So they're actually a potential person that's looking for better health.
Yeah, and I remember when I was doing these talks when I was first out of school with my friend, we were both starting our practices together, and we do these joint talks. Sometimes you have 4 people show up, and sometimes you would have 15 people show up, or sometimes you have more. And then it was like, it really didn't matter because you could have one person, you could have you could do 2 of those in a row and have nothing happen and have no interest in people working with you or wanting to see you. And then you would have a talk with 3 people came or something, and one of them connects with you, and all of a sudden you get 20 referrals for them in a year.
Yeah.
You never know, like that one person that can really help build your practice. But the more you put yourself out there, you're just looking for that one to have an impact on, and then you have potential referral source. And I would also say, I think all the marketing stuff people do, I think it's just crazy. I don't think it works really well. You just have to make sure there's a way they can connect with you, afterwards. And for the most part, what I've noticed, and tell me if you agree, is it's just really exactly what you're saying is they're either going to connect with you or not connect with you. It's not as much as even what you say. It's more like, oh, I really think I can communicate and talk with you and share my issues with you. And I think you would listen. And I think that you would be able to, help me. And I think that's a big part of it. When people try to do overly salesy things and give huge offers and specials and all that, that only goes, I don't think it's effective. Not to say you
Yeah.
can't do a promotion or do something to help people. But it's very careful. I think you're very careful. Now, I've also seen, like, with modern technology, a lot of YouTube channels. Like, I've had people that have done YouTube channels, but it's like they've been on for 9 months and they have like 30 subscribed people. Like, it doesn't necessarily work. And then they don't build that relationship, and that 30 people could be nowhere near your practice, and they don't really care. So those personal relationships, I think, are everything, right? Like, once you build them, and that's never going to go away.
Right. Yeah, I've always been blessed in my life because I just had great patients, people you would just enjoy being with. They're just amazing people. But, they have to know if they can trust you.
Yeah.
And trust is one of those things that just you emanate trust if you're trustworthy. You're just going to be honest with them. You're going to be fair with them. You're going to be right with them, and you'll work hard for them. And, so in our world with the modern, you've got technology because you can do these things, whatever practice you're practicing, you can have the latest technology of everything, but if they don't feel like they can connect or trust you, so on the facade you might have a look. We can see it in managed care now. We have amazing facilities, hospitals, whatever, and yet how many people do you get that come in and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe you understand what I'm talking about?
Right.
You're hearing what I'm saying, and you have experience with this, and they're mostly not getting that in these other places with a certain presentation.
And building trust is very straightforward. You're, like you said, you become trustworthy. You tell them the exact truth.
Yeah.
You trust with them. You look them in the eye. You tell them what you think, and you have the intent of doing the best you can for them. And of course, you set your guidelines and your principles of your office and how you do things to make it safe for you and safe for your office staff, as far as not having to, having limits to how many hours you can work and how many things you can do, and having them respect your time with your structure. But outside of that, you just having honest discussions. How often have you said to patients, I'm not sure it's happening, but let's think about it together and work through it? How many times have you done that in your practice?
Yeah, I'll tell people, I say, well, you know what, this is kind of what I'm seeing, and I have this feeling that we're going to find something out. I said, I can't promise this is going to be a grand slam or a home run, but you know what, you're going to end up most likely way better than you are right now, but we're going to have to investigate. So we're going to have to work together, and if they'll do what I'm guiding them to do, we're going to find real things.
Right.
And they appreciate that.
Some practitioners have like a practice where they have a partnership together and they have open discussions and they kind of plan things together. Some practices have practices where they just tell the patient what to do, and they have like goals, and they do follow-ups, and they try to see how compliant they're with the goals and how things are. What have you seen work for you? What strategy have you really done?
When I first started, I was part of I think it was Gibson Management or something. It was one of these management companies for chiropractors. And this is long before I got into neurology, but so I learned a lot about that. I learned a lot about, having systems in place and knowing your timing and pay attention and be present, et cetera, et cetera. But, a lot of that was built on just pure numbers. You had a treatment plan, you had to tell them you had to see them X number of times, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just numbers, right? I mean, you're going to make more money if you tell people to come in 20 times instead of 8 times or whatever, So I've done all that, and I can appreciate all that. But I think that in the end, after these many years, I like to treat patients the way I would want to be treated as a patient if I were the patient. So if I was pulling money out of my pocket and I was seeking healthcare, and I had, I have tougher cases now. It wasn't simple kind of blocking in the neck or a little shoulder problem or whatever, but these are more complex cases. But it's not cheap for these people. They're pulling out of pocket. I don't bill for insurance anymore, but I want to be fair with them, and I want them to get more than that they're actually paying for. And I'm hoping to change their world, and so they're out of these places that are really rough for them. And so I don't have to treat somebody 2 or 3 times a week. I don't have to. I found that is not necessary, but I'll give them lots of exercises and things. But I find that, again, if you are real with them and you see certain aspects and you express that to them and you give them, I do think goals are really critical with patients. So they kind of know where they're going, and not leaving them open-ended, indefinitely, like when does that end? So I think that there are some goals that you have to have with the patient with their input. And sometimes I'll see things. This happens all the time. I'll get people that just, have a common low back pain issue, and then I'll see all kinds of other things. And I just tell them, I said, well, you may not want to really know about these things, but I just feel an obligation as a practitioner that I do see some of these patterns happening. Some of these systems are failing, and I'm happy to treat you, but just know that A and B are probably part of the situation. If you want me to figure that out, I'll figure it out. And if you don't, it's fine. You can say, just help my low back and I'll call you when I need you. And that's totally fine as well. But it's not that often, but because most of the people that come in to see me now they've got a lot of complexity that they've already been to dozens of people and not much has helped. So they appreciate that.
Right. I think for people that practice something that's associated with pain management, like chiropractic or acupuncture or something, there's just a set of people that will come in for pain reason, number one driver.
Sure.
I don't know you do functional medicine, and then over time, you basically just referrals for functional medicine because people had some outcome with you doing the functional medicine approach, and then they want to come in and really do those strategies. So what do you do with patients that, well, let me actually talk about a couple of things. One of them is, for myself, I noticed I was making patient appointments too long. And I realized that was actually not the best for the patient. That, especially in the beginning, I needed to do it more frequently because they would get out of touch. So I actually kind of went opposite. I was just, there was just like, I just saw once. It was like the big deal. Or I saw him a couple of times. And it's like, that wasn't necessarily the best benefit. Sometimes what I found over the years is like, it takes them a while to digest everything. Right. You have to kind of do something and talk about from a functional medicine perspective, not for, let's say, a pain management case or something. But you have to and like you said, is having goals. So I always like to put phases and plans and goals and kind of see what we are and try to walk through and have them see the big picture. And that seemed to help. And that discussion of like how often, you should do follow-ups and how often you should see them is always one I think a lot of practitioners battle with. But my observation was I wasn't doing enough of them in the beginning. And then as time went on, they would space out and go from there. So I typically do like one a month, and I would probably prefer to, if I had the space and timing in my office, I'd probably prefer to do like the first maybe 2 weeks apart and then maybe monthly. But right now I only have time to do one a month. So I have to try to make it count. But that's what I found. What have you found for specifically just functional medicine cases, not necessarily pain patients?
Yeah. So well, most of my patients right now, I'll see every 1 to 2 weeks for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. And in that process, we've kind of moved through a number of phases that we need to get through, whether that's lab testing, seeing other pieces. I know people do this all differently. Sometimes people do it on the front side before they even see them. But most of my patients, they might have a past lab from someone maybe a year ago, but I've got to start with some things. And I don't, I can't, like you say, they just cannot digest everything.
Yeah.
And I often have them bring somebody with them because they'll agree and shake their head and understand. But they'll walk out of that room and they might be impressed and say, oh, wow, that was amazing to their spouse or something, their friend, but they're not going to retain that much information. It's too unique. So I'll either have them recorded or have a friend but I know that I need to kind of recap that in the next visit.
Yeah.
And so I kind of do a brief summary again. I tell them what our goals are, or what I would suggest, and then I want to hear what their goals are, and then we set it up from there. So I have a number of patients I'll see once a week for the next 4 to 6 weeks, but there are certain exercises I'm always kind of tweaking on brain as well as their own nutritional pieces, and if these have vestibular disorders or things like that. So. That's kind of what I do after 4 to 6 weeks. Then I might see them in 3 to 4 weeks, a couple of times. Yep. And then I'm moving through where their labs are going, and they've kind of figured out some pieces to that.
Right. An important thing you said, and I find it to be very important too, is they have to leave with a summary of what's happening, and that can be done like different ways. So if I'm with a patient in person, I'll usually just have them pull out their iPhone and go, hey, let me summarize everything for you, blah, 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 and then put it that way. And then that really helps. If I'm doing a Zoom follow-up, I'll just record it, and then I'll send the send the file to them afterwards, which is now it's a routine thing that I've been doing. A lot of my follow-ups are with Zoom, and this seems to work really, really well. And at the very least, I'll at least send them a summary email, because with my own, with our own charts and notes, we have a summary of what we're doing and just kind of summary notes. But there's got to be some conclusion, I think, to really make that appointment worthwhile. And and it sounds like you and other experts I talked to that are successful in practice all have that same trait of just really making sure that the message is clear with them, and they can lead with some kind of understanding of what's happening. That effort has to be made. Right.
Yeah, they need to be able to review that, or kind of, these are big words. So I'll usually send them copies of my summary or my notes. They get copies of their notes. Yeah. I'll have them record it. Yeah. I put some summary pieces in there. So I do think that's, I wouldn't say that's always been my strong point, but I feel like it's really critical. And so I'm having them at least record the summary, and we usually summarize that on a follow-up visit as well. So I kind of come back through and I kind of hit the main bullet points and where we're headed with these are issues that we need to either rule in or out, and we go from there.
Yep. And what do you do with patients where finances are an issue? Do you ever sponsor any patients? Do you ever give free care to any patients? How do you handle those situations? I mean, you can really open up an ugly set of problems once you start playing that game.
Sure. So how do you be fair to everybody? What we've done in the past sometimes, which this is to the credit of my amazing wife, and that is that we'll do a kind of a scholarship kind of a thing. So if there's a few people, then we will have them submit something, or we'll choose, have a selection process, and then we offer something. So it's something that we're giving back to people who are in need or have financial challenges. And then if we have a conversation, then I'll give them some kind of a discount. But I don't, getting into that world where you're just giving away free care, I don't find really works that well.
Right.
And so
I agree with you.
It has to be qualified in some way. There's
a couple of things I want to point out. I learned about that. One of them is when you give away free care, or actually and I got this advice speaking to other clinicians that were in practice longer than I was when I was starting out. And one of the things they told me was never discount your fees, because it impacts your self-worth and at a subconscious level, and it impacts your energy exchange. Just make it so where your fees are always the same. Just they have a payment schedule where they can work on it and pay it off, and they can do increments where they can afford it. But you don't actually discount your care, because it has an impact on you psychologically as well. And I thought, okay, that was very interesting. And I thought that was somewhat true. That
sure,
you have to respect it. And then the times when you really open it up, I think it causes some problems. Obviously, I've had patients recently I've had a patient with progressive MS. I see them going downhill. They can't work and they need some help. So I'm like, hey, listen, and I know they can't afford the care. So I make myself available for them. But I also know that I have to schedule only so many of those per day, because if I have like 2 of those or 3 of those the same day, I got a problem, because then it's just an energy demand and it wipes you out and has an impact. So I find I have to space those out, and then got to be very careful. And one of the things that I found from my malpractice care is the patients you end up giving free care to have a much, much, much higher risk of actually doing litigation against you and filing a suit against you. And I'm not sure what that is, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a level of thinking there, but I would have to say, and I think I kind of picked your brain way back when, because I was kind of in a bit of a pickle. So maybe some of your listeners might be in the same situation. And that it was, I was a chiropractic neurologist, and I did functional medicine, but you're trying to put all these pieces together, and I did billing for insurance, and they're not going to pay for a bunch of stuff. And so I packed a lot in an appointment, and it was, probably sucking my battery a bit dry. And so I was kind of wondering how to navigate that. But, I've transitioned in this new practice, and I don't bill any insurance, and people pay. But what my experience over time has been is that people just make choices.
Yeah.
And they're gonna, everybody has financial demands.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not serving the elitists that have, endless bank accounts.
Yeah.
I remember in California, there's certain cultures there that were just amazing. I mean, they paid everything by cash. They had multi-family dwellings. The Latin population they'd come in and they'd pay for the care. They'd go figure it out. They didn't ask for some discount. But I feel like if you give too much away, of course, it doesn't mean a whole lot to the patient. They're not going to really savor it the same way. They're not committed the same. It's like a gym that you pay 50 cents a month for. You're not going to go to that gym, most likely. I mean, you might find a couple people that do that, but when you pay for a gym membership, you feel like, okay, you've got to, and I just find that there's kind of that double-sided scenario that people they've got to have their health, and they need to kind of respect what's going on. And so I don't have a problem with that now. And I find that some are just not going to do what you want to do anyway. And if they don't want to see or come into your office, it's okay. They don't have to.
Yeah.
They can go to the other guy that charges very little, and okay, great. I think you need to have compassion, but you're actually doing them a service that they can actually move to a different place.
Yeah.
And you're
Yep. And I also found for myself, because, we all go into healthcare because we wanted to help people. It's not like I don't know anyone that got into healthcare because they wanted to, make money. They usually go into banking or other things.
Yeah, they made a bad choice if that was the issue.
But at the same time, we're always struggling with, our time, and our time is the times how we can pay our staff, pay our family, have time to spend with them. So it's like the time we have is so precious, and we just give it away and hand it away. It's like you're taking time away from maybe your office staff getting a raise or something, or it's time you could have had with another family member, or a day off you could have done something with.
There's no end to that.
But what happens in healthcare is you track the caring person that comes in, and the healthcare practitioner has genuine need to help people, and especially if they see someone in need that is they typically. I've seen some personalities offer their care way too often and spend too long. It doesn't have to necessarily be free care, but it could be like you have a 20-minute appointment with them and you go an hour and a half each time, every time. Yeah. That's really harmful to you, I think to the average person. And so one of the ways I found, because I always had an issue with it, and in the beginning of my practice, I did that way too much, and it had a really negative impact on everyone around me. Everyone else suffered from it because of my decision to do that, meaning I had less resources for my office staff. I couldn't do as much things with my office as I needed to because there was less resources coming in when I was doing that more often, and I had less time. I could spend time at home, and it was just like this consequence that came down. And like you said, some wouldn't appreciate it, but I didn't like to be in that position myself. Like I didn't want to have to deal and have that discussion because it was hard on me, because it's not an easy discussion to have when you see like you can help someone, but they may not be able to afford stuff of care. So it really helped me just to disclose my prices. Like here are my fees. I charge this much for initial appointment. This is my follow-up. And then when people call in the office, we go, a typical case can, run this much in the next year. These are the three. We actually have basically a simple letter. And my letter is not you're supposed to be anyone else's listening letter. And, just it's basically, these are our fees. Most patients, expect this amount. And I put these are my initial fees. I'd like to do a follow-up monthly for the first 4 to 6 months, and then we'll space it out as you feel. These are the fees. I do a 40-minute follow-up. I found works for me. And so I just stick with that right now. And there's options to do greater time. I just give them a 40-minute thing. And then I say, the other expense could be supplements. This is what they can cost throughout the year between this amount and this amount. And then lab tests could be another expense, is what they cost for this amount. Yeah. And the total cost in the year could be between this and this. And then they get that ahead of time. And I seem I don't have those discussions anymore of just having someone come in and then you go, okay, well, this isn't I don't know what to do. And then you have that issue. It's kind of like, and I'll tell you, I don't have an elite population of patients. I have a patient population who then decides and thinks about the value of the care and then decides to come in, right? So I would say my fees are they're not cheap, but they're also not out of reach for someone. There's some people it might be out of reach for, it's just that's the way life is. You're a professional, not every professional service is reach. So I found that helps me. Do you do something like that? Do you find that useful?
Yeah, I think one philosophy I've always had in my practice is that, I learned after a certain number of years, no one likes surprises.
Right.
So I think that it doesn't matter what you're in. So I think having something where they understand up front what that's going to cost, and they understand a little bit where they're going. That's why a plan is helpful when you first meet with them and you kind of see what's going on and you're talking about what this is going to take. And I'll tell them, well, it's going to take you 4 months to get to this other place. Or if we're addressing a leaky gut scenario, or if we're doing this and that, then we're going to retest. And so I think it's brilliant that you've categorized the average costs of these things, and people, then they're not surprised, and then they go. I had a patient the other day walked in, and I was just almost ready to go, and he walked in. He had no appointment. He just was looking. I don't know. He just found me on Google, and he had a simple low back problem, and so I took him in the room. I said, "Hey, I could help you out today. I just want you to know kind of what this means, okay?" So because I know that he may be thinking that. I said, well, this is kind of what I do, and I'm not going to really just address this issue without understanding what your body's doing, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, these are going to be your fees. And I knew that was going to be a surprise to him. And he walked out and says, you know what? I cannot wait to make an appointment with you. I'm not prepared for that today. And he says, but I can tell you know what you're talking about. And he'd had some TBIs and other things in the past too. So we left friends, and he understood, and he wasn't disgruntled in any way. He was pleased, but I just wanted him to be aware that he wasn't going to get surprised in the end.
Right. Now, one of the things that has been a problem for professions is people that sell packages. Sometimes people like $5,000, like people, there was a group of people that were signing up people with thyroid pen, and they were charging $5,000 or $10,000 or something, and include all the lab swallows. Those people I've seen have a lot of problems. And I've also seen them, for example, when you put yourself in that situation, like you can't end it's how do you terminate a relationship that's not healthy? So if the relationship isn't healthy anymore, what if you can't meet their goals? What are your thoughts on those types of plans, or what have you seen out there with patients that have gone through those? What have you noticed with them?
Yeah, I probably don't have a ton of experience with that. I hear them like my office now is inside of an anesthesiology pain clinic, but so one of their staff across the hall didn't know what I did actually, but they had connected with somebody on the East Coast, paying $10,000 to have them lose weight and address their inflammation. And I found out, as they were into it, I said, oh, wow, okay. And I think you have a point there. I think that you're kind of setting yourself up when you charge a certain fee, and then people are going to say, okay, that they've decided that is what that's worth to them to solve this problem. But it's a little dangerous because you've kind of put yourself out there as if you're guaranteeing to resolve a problem that you're not sure you're going to be able to solve to their satisfaction. Right. So now you're going to open yourself up to other reviews, or people being disgruntled or whatever. So I don't know. I think that people being aware, and you have options, they have options. I always say people's health is their health, and I'm there to help them get where they want to go. Yeah. And early on in my profession, I thought I knew it all. I didn't consciously admit that in my consciousness. I know I acted that way, but it's just because I felt I knew the answers. Right. But in the end, it's not always that way. So I say, I'm here to help you, and I don't have any agenda except to help you. But I will tell you that this doesn't work in 99% of the cases, and this would, or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's the way to do it. You want to have that ability to, sometimes sometimes the expectation of the patient and your expectation totally different. Sometimes it's just not working out. Sometimes you think they respond, they don't. You want to be able to have that ability just to have a discussion and have people go their own way and have their own things. And, I've been asked by many different state boards to testify as an expert witness in most of the cases are people that sell packages and do these overzealous things and promise too much. I think it's really, really a problem. And it tends to happen in the functional medicine community a lot, more so than I would like. Now, what do you, when you look at your practice, one of the battles we all have is staying on time. What helps you stay on time, and how important do you think that is?
My front desk person.
Front desk person.
I say just knock on the door, or you can wear your steel-toed boots. But it is challenging with all things that we're doing. So I just have a signaling thing with my front desk, and I have them let me know when the next patient has arrived. So I kind of know they're there, and I try to wrap up. And I would say if you asked all my staff, they would say, well, Amber's just not the most timely guy, but I try to, 5 minutes is one thing, maybe 10, but you get past that, that becomes a problem in my book. So most people would be patient with that, but if they're waiting 20, 25 minutes, and sometimes it does happen. Sometimes there's just a whole, and it's difficult as a practitioner because the patient doesn't want to be told, hey, you know what, our time is up. And how about we reschedule you for 2 days from now and we'll finish this conversation. Sometimes it's okay to do that, but most are pretty disappointed if that happens. And yet they come in with questions that aren't like two-word answers. So I feel like you're in a bit of a pickle, but if I ever exceed like 10 minutes, then I do something special for the patient.
What do you do?
I'll offer different things. I'll give them a certificate for a half-hour massage at some massage therapist nearby that I'm connected with, or something like that. I'll do something for them so they realize that I do value their time as well. It's not just about me. And or I'll give them I'll write off something, or I'll give them I might gift them their favorite supplement that they're out of, or something like that. I just do something as a token, as a gesture, to say that, hey, I'm in the bad here. I'm so sorry. Forgive us for running behind. And so I'll offer that. Lots of times people don't bother, don't take that. But I just think there's an acknowledgement.
The acknowledgement of their time is precious, and you're aware of that is a big deal.
Yeah.
And also, you have the system where your staff will just knock on your door.
Yeah, well, people do have different systems. I always had, intercom systems in my rooms. Where I'm at now, I do have a phone. It doesn't have an intercom. She'll actually just beep me, like she's just going to do an inter office connection. She'll just beep me once, and then I know that the patient's here. So, and that's kind of a signal to me. But if I'm 5 minutes late, I don't have her do that. I don't have her knock at the beginning, like if they first arrive. I have her knock at like 5 minutes after my appointment time should have ended.
I see. And
she'll just tap on the door, like 2 taps, and then I know, so I got to wrap this up. And patients are pretty understanding. I said, well, I'm going to have to get going. I've got other patients waiting, and they'll apologize, whatever, but they might have one last question or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I think most patients are that way. Now, you have some patients, I'm sure, that it's a struggle to keep them on time the whole time. And what's your strategy when you see that?
You're just aware, and I'm just careful on my answers. I don't go too long. I give them the answers and of their questions, but I know they've got another laundry list of questions that they're not done with. So I kind of assume this is always going to go that way. So I try and just, kindly move through them all quickly. And then if we're still way behind, I'll just mention, okay, we just got a few more minutes here and I'll have to get going. So I still give them a few more minutes. I don't truncate it. I don't say I've got to go, see you next visit or whatever. That's the best I can do.
Right. So what I started doing is I started writing, what are your goals of your appointment? What questions do you have on a questionnaire form before? Yeah. And then they just walk in with that. And I actually do it with all my patients now. And then I go, hey, you don't have so much time. I want to show how to cover all these things that you listed here. And then I'll also say, listen, let's say they had a 40-minute appointment. I go, we're 20 minutes in and we haven't really gone to what you need to get to. So let me make sure we get to it. And I make them conscious of their questions they initially had and the time, and try to get through it. And I
think that's brilliant. And I think that's one of your gifts, actually, because I see you do something like that frequently. And I think it's nicely done. People know when you're interested in giving them the most, and they have to kind of understand that. And they in my office, they know if we keep going, they're going to pay more.
Right.
So.
In being late, how toxic do you think it can be? How impactful could it be if you're always late, let's say 30 minutes, 40 minutes late, and you didn't do the interventions you were doing? Because, we see other practitioners, and we always see the other practitioners, and sometimes we see they're struggling in practice, and then you talk to them and they're brilliant, and they know
But they're making these mistakes.
They're making these little mistakes that this destroy their practice. It's like,
no, it's huge. Yeah, it's huge. I would say I heard a statistic. I can't, validate it. But I remember from some consulting firm, I think it costs you 8 times the money it does to lose a patient than it does to get one.
Right.
So you do something poorly, and you have to make that right. You're not a demigod because you have some credentials after your name.
Right.
You're a human like the rest of them walking the earth, and you just happen to know something about this area, this level of expertise, and then you have to treat everybody else just like they're a human as well. So I think you have to make that right. So I think that if you're consistently like that, it's death.
It's death.
I think it's death.
I agree. I had experiences you have, like teaching, you've taught people, and when you go teach, people talk to you, people want to get to lunch, and afterwards they have questions, and then and sometimes if they get to know you well enough, they'll say something like, I just can't get my practice going, or I'm struggling with my practice. And I'm really, and for me, in many instances, I'm really surprised because they're so intelligent and they're such a great clinician and no material. I'm like, well, what's going on with your practice? And I remember I actually visited one of my friends in practice, and I'm like, well, holy moly, no wonder. Like, you're so disorganized, you have stuff all over, you're so late. Your office staff is just basically patching up all the holes all day. It's like, the reason your practice is unsuccessful is because you suck. You suck at time management. Like, you can't respect other people's time. And that's one of the things is, like, you see people putting all this effort and time and energy into learning how to be a better clinician, and then the practices are totally fail. And one of them is absolutely not being able to keep a schedule that's consistent and respecting other people's time.
Well, I think you have to train yourself to think in a certain way as a practitioner. You have to be thinking, and I don't want to say at multiple levels, but it could be that, but you have to be aware, and you have to be thinking of the things you want to accomplish with that patient.
Right.
And I find that, it was some years ago, I was about 15 years ago. I thought, if I'm going to stay away from my family, so, I got married late, and then I had my family, and then I didn't want to lose time with my family. And I thought, if I'm going to be at the office, I'm going to make it's got to be productive.
Right.
If it's not productive, then I'm going to be with my family. Yes. So I kind of made some decisions, and I'd had quite a bit of experience already, but I decided to make my time way more efficient with the patient while I was with them. And then I could see more patients, and I actually served them better. And I think I kind of came to a different level as a practitioner.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a benefit to everybody.
Yeah. One of the things I've done, tell me if you do this too, is one of the things I've done is I'll look at the schedule the day before, or sometimes the morning before. I give myself a little time, and then I'll review their notes and review my notes, and before they come in, they already have a plan of action and ahead of the appointment. So then when I see them, it's really, really efficient. The time it takes to go back and look at notes and try to figure out what you were piecing together and do things. And if you try to do that during the appointment, it just kind of throws you off. And I found out if I didn't do that, I would end up having to, fall behind and do stuff. And then I was already looked at my notes and how the idea I was going to do with each single person that day. That made a huge, huge difference in my efficiency. Do you do that, or what do you do?
Yeah, I don't know that I do it on every patient if it's somebody that's been pretty established.
Right.
But I do that on someone who is new, or let's say I've seen somebody and now it's been the first time, it's been 3 weeks since I've seen them. I've got to review my plan with that and orient myself to that and what my goals are with that visit. So the other thing that I do is, I script something, it goes in their file as they leave that appointment. So whether that's exercises, any nutritional protocols, labs they need to do, and I'll glance at that, and I'll always check with the staff. The other thing I was going to say is that I try to have a huddle with my staff in the morning and then just after lunch for the afternoon.
Oh,
so it's like a 2 to 4 minute huddle. Who's on the schedule? Are we ready? Oh, we have to have, A and B ready for them, or is that lab, is it in from that company? Do we have it printed out? I should have reviewed it already. I normally always do. And on my review of things, I will always, to be more efficient, let's say I take just a regular panel, some wellness panel, and I just summarize the top 3 things in that panel that I see that are not correct, that we need to focus on. And then I'll put a little protocol for what I think I would recommend for them to do. So when I see them next time, I just glance at that, I see it, and boom, boom, boom. And then I don't have to go through every, highlighted, lab item that's off color or whatever, and they want to know all those questions. I just kind of summarize it and I point to a couple of factors. So that huddle is really helpful. The days that I don't get that huddle down, I'm telling you something, something costs us 10 minutes we didn't expect.
Right. And what other things are you doing besides huddles that you found to be very successful implementation to your practice?
Other things are things I cover in the huddle.
What do you mean?
No, so I didn't hear your whole question. Is it what do I cover in the huddle? Or
no, what you cover in the huddle. Like, so you're huddling you're having this get together with your staff twice a day. You're going over everything, make sure everything's on track, and that's helping you be more efficient in practice, right?
Right.
But not everyone does that.
Right.
But that's something you learn over time that you need to do that. Are there any things else?
Yeah, and any other little pearls that I find that have helped my practice?
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you one thing that does, and I'll go to my grave saying this, and it's kind of weird, but I learned this from Gibson Management when I was first in practice, and that is you do a quality control call the night after you first see the patient. So if you were just a standard chiropractor and you weren't doing any functional medicine, we would say, after the ROF, like they're after they got treated or their second visit when they got treated and saw their x-rays or whatever, you want to check in on that patient. And I call those quality control calls. And I have my staff write their name down with their phone number. And usually I'll just call while I'm driving home. And so I call and say, hey, Mary, how's it going? I saw you today. I want to check in on you, see how you're doing. Do you have any further questions? I give them a couple tips. It might be a 3 to 4 minute phone call. Lots of times it's a message on their cell phone. But, who gets a call from their doctor?
Yeah.
That's like that. And I'll tell you that the cases that I've ever had that grumbled or complained about something later, I didn't make that phone call. So there's something about that they just kind of shift how they're going to view you, and they see that you're caring about them. So that's one thing.
Now let me ask you a question about that before you go on.
Yeah.
So modern technology, but why don't I just send them an email instead? Do you think you can?
No, it's not the same. I don't think.
Not the same, right? Okay.
I don't think an email. So some years back, they were, this is back when technology was just evolving, and they had those little gizmos that you could do a little video email.
Right.
And you did the little video and said, hi, Mary. You give them their little tidbits. If you want to make sure they're healthy, put ice on it, take your vitamins, whatever you're going to say. And I thought that was brilliant too. But, a lot of people don't get an email, and it's different making a phone call.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's different because with the phone call, you can actually receive information from them and input and their comments and how they feel.
Oh, and you hear their tone. And then they just thank you like 4 times before you hang up.
Right.
They say, oh, thank you so much for that phone call. Now, I don't probably most of the time ever call that patient again directly, just spontaneously. I might if I see a problem. Usually I'll have the staff do that. And I've never had people abuse that. And often it's on my own cell phone. So I never gave my cell phone to patients before until I had to commute and I moved from California. But some have it now, but that was never abused, and people like it. So,
okay. So that's number one. What was the other one you were about to get into before I interrupted you?
Well, I would just say that, having a treatment plan, that the patient understands it, and that you are always wanting to hear what they have to say. So when I think these things happen subconsciously. It's a big position to be a healthcare provider. You have a lot of responsibility, and that patient is totally giving up their being to you to help them. And my goal was always to be good enough that people would pay hard, cold cash out of their pocket to get better. That was my goal. It's no real compliment with people, and most of these functional medicine people, that's what they're doing. But back in the day when it was about insurance, that's not necessarily a compliment that your insurance is going to pay. Or personal injury accidents, all those people keep their appointments, somebody else is paying, but I I think that you have to have, you're delivering something for them, and it's a big responsibility, and you let them know, and they need to be able to feel like they can share, and it's not going to be you're defensive or you're going to take it personal or anything else. So I think that's just important, that there's not that barrier. Like, I'm the doctor and I'm telling you what to do.
Right. Okay. Those are very good. Anything else?
Well, I just think that I think there's certain traps that we get into as practitioners. Whatever the latest gizmo is, but there's lots of ways to do things.
Right.
You don't have to always have a VNG machine.
Right.
You don't have to have posture machines necessarily. You can still help people out. Yeah, it's really fantastic to have those machines.
Right.
And I've had some of them, but what I've learned in the end is that you still have to be able to pay for those machines. And do the patients want to pay the extra fee that they might pay for that screening?
Right.
So I think that, but I think there's a learning curve that happens with the doctor as they keep expanding, understanding, getting more clinical experience. I used to do VNGs all the time.
Right.
I can do them, but if it's not for research, it's really critical, right?
Yeah.
But
some of the people may not have neurology backups. They may understand that, but it's the concept is just bringing in equipment that is useful into your office, right? So, like, I spoke with a cardiologist the other day, and she has a Endopath $15,000 blood vessel assessment, and it's like, okay, well, that's nice to have, but not everyone is going to invest in that because they're not a practicing cardiologist.
Right.
Some people, I think, people buy equipment because they think that'll make them a better clinician. Is like they're compensating for something, and sometimes you have to have it. Like, there's some exam tools I have in my office. I go, I need them. I have to have them because it helps me with my interpretation and evaluation. And then some, like maybe I bought them too early. I didn't need them, and I think we all go through
right.
that.
Yeah, we all go through that. And I think the key is that you have somebody you trust. And you say, wait, is there a way around this if I can't afford this right now? Or maybe it's on your list. It's your list. Someday, you're saving your money. You want to have that, and you're going to use it. I think the technology and equipment is amazing now, but we don't have to feel like, so when you go learn something, you go to Karazian, presentation that you're doing, or anything you learn, you want to walk away with a handful of pearls that you can start the next day and be thinking about implementing them. And I think it's a disservice if people feel like they have to have that piece of equipment to actually start applying some of the information.
Now, you said something important, and some of the other experts we've had have said a similar thing. They said when they go to a seminar, the biggest thing is implementation. It's not what you learn. So when they leave, they'll pick a few things that they'll just start to implement into their practice right away. And you just mentioned that also. So tell me what you mean by that, and what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I always leave and I'm all fired up. Of course, most people are, but you want to apply it all. And people are different, but I just say, if you can walk away and start the next day having something solidified enough in your mind, in your understanding and perception, that when you see a case, I just went through your Hashimoto's presentation again recently. So, and I've been dealing with thyroid issues for a long time, but boy, I learned some things. I thought, you know what? And so the next day I swear I had like 4 people I was talking to about certain things. Right. Yeah. Well, that's, I would call that a gift. Okay. So that's just something you walk away with, and it's now blessing somebody's life. It's now solidifying in yours. It's going to be part of your protocol. And you're not going to remember some of the other peripheral things. And I think it's unique for each one of us when we're listening. So those of us that, if we are listening, we're probably going to hear the things that are most critical for us to be implementing.
Right.
And that could be different for different people. There could be gaping holes in our approach on something, and boom, somehow, innate or whatever, we see that and we go, okay, that's going to plug that hole for me. And there's other peripheral stuff, but
right. Another big issue always comes up, and you mentioned also, is cost, and it's like overhead. And sometimes I've seen practitioners where their overhead is so low, everything's online scheduling, there's no one to kind of connect with them, they're responsible for everything, and that actually hurts their practice. Mm-hmm. And then other times people just get way too much staff and bill too much, and they can't let anyone go, and their overhead is ballooned so high that they're just burning away their time and energy in their practice with nothing because it's overhead so high.
Right.
So how do you find the balance?
Well, you're talking to an old patriarch now, so because I've been in practice for a while, so I've done it both ways. But I can't tell you, up here now in Idaho, when I left, I had a 4,000 square foot office. I had a bunch of stuff, but I had a certain nut I had to crack every month, right? Just to pay all the expenses. Right?
And you were in Northern California, just so people know.
Yes, yeah, I was up in the wine country in Santa Rosa, and
yeah, expensive.
And I loved it. Had a great practice, and it was. I still connect. I still do Zoom call stuff for some patients there, but so I moved up here. But I'm at a different stage in my life, and we could talk more about stages. But there's certain times of life where it works better than others, and I just decided I just didn't. I wanted to give back to patients. I needed to be compensated, and I didn't want to have to be working to live. I just wanted to. I was, living to work. I wanted to just work to live. And so anyway, that's how I shifted that. My overhead now is, and my wife goes, wow. And we have such low overhead. I produce, recently I had a month I collected more than any other month in my 35 years. And I'm doing 3 days a week, and it's supposed to be, down-regulated. I'm doing some different things that I was not able to do in California back then, but nonetheless, my overhead is peanuts. Right. And I'm in a fairly small office. I don't want to have 4 or 5 or 8 staff. These are all personal choices people make, and what their dream is or not, right? But it's a little challenging when you've got a huge overhead all the time, and you're going to feel that kind of pressure. It can burn you out pretty easily.
And the biggest cause of overhead is just getting way too much space, your rent's way too high, and having way too much staff are like the main ones, right? Are there?
Yeah, I would say, well, I would say staffing is probably your biggest issue. And then if you have too much space, of course, but you can kind of forecast I would say, I don't know, these business consultant guys can tell you all those numbers, but whatever your space should be costing you, but you get your Google stuff going, you get your online, your website stuff going, who's doing all that. So I would say salaries and rent are your biggest things, but then you get into some of these other expenses. And then if you add equipment on top of that, you're paying $700 to $1,000 a month in one piece of equipment, it starts adding up, and then you feel this pressure, and then you don't ever really feel rewarded. You don't feel, I'm not saying we have to all run around with high lifestyles, but, to pay your bills and be able to enjoy time with your family and help your kids get to school and some things like that are pretty important.
So do you have how many staff persons do you have?
I have my office manager, I call her that, but she's basically my only full-time person. I have another part-time person that helps with some books and some stuff like that. And then I have a nurse that comes in that's part-time, might be 10, 12 hours a month.
And it's just based on how much time you need and not overdoing it.
Right. I'm keeping him part-time. I'm interviewing for another nurse right now because I'm kind of expanding, doing some other stuff. Yeah. And I can't do it all myself. So I'm going to need a little bit of help, but it'll be limited hours. And
there's a point where if you don't have it, like if you keep your overhead so low where you don't have any staff and you have everyone's schedule online.
Yeah, that's a problem.
I think it hurts you too.
Yeah, I would say, well, this is what I had a thought when you were expressing that earlier. And that is that our world has gotten so digital and so automated, but I think that hurts us if we get too automated. Yeah. I think that people like to call someone and they like to ask their questions. So I'm really all about, I used to practice when computers didn't exist. Right. So that's kind of scary, but it's true. And I remember really debating about using your computer because the minute you have it, you're looking at the screen instead of the patient. And so I think people are still humans. I don't care what generation they are. They still like to have a contact with people and feel like someone's listening and they're going to be heard. And so I think making appointments and things like that, I think it's fine to leave a message. I think it's fine to make an email. I think it's fine to make an appointment over the internet. Some people choose that. It's fine. Yeah. But you still have to have a connection.
Yeah. And there's different circumstances. Some people just do online practice, which doesn't matter. But I think there's a level of just unprofessionalism you don't have, even legitimacy, if you're doing it all yourself. And then also you're wasting a lot of your own time. And maybe in the beginning you started to do that, that's fine. But there's a point where you want to have someone that you can interact
Your
with.
productivity changes, right? If you're doing all those other pieces, you have bigger things you could be doing,
Right.
more important for patients.
Have to make that transition. So I always end interviews with what advice would you give those that are new, and what advice would you give those that are experienced regarding functional medicine practice lifestyle? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would say that believe in yourself, have courage, have people around you that you know are true, that they're going to tell you the real thing. They're going to give you good information. They'll be real about it. I tell people all the time, I started when I was, I got to intern with a world-renowned doctor in Switzerland when I first graduated. I wasn't even graduated yet. So it was part of my postceptor or preceptor. But so I've kind of surrounded myself, and I just go to people that I can trust. And when you get their experience and they're giving you guidance, you can kind of hang your hat on that to a degree until you get your own clinical experience, and just have courage and move forward. You're going to find the answers to the things that are challenging. You just keep asking the questions and keep refining, and you'll find the answers. So those people that are struggling in their practice, or they are not generating enough income, just spend some time with some people. Don't hesitate to call somebody, have lunch with somebody, pick their brain, see what they're doing, have somebody come in, look at your office, kind of review what's happening, go to someone else's office, be a patient at someone else's office, see how that rolls. And it's like, oh yeah, wow, that makes a big difference. Some of these things, if you're off 2 to 5 minutes on every patient, you're going to see 10 or 20 in a day, that becomes a problem. It starts adding up. So you have to, this is why I sometimes don't have lunch. I get to eat in 5 minutes, but you can try and make up other ways. But so I would just say having confidence in a true sense with your knowledge, and you're willing to apply, and that you're humble enough to learn, and don't act like you know everything. Just move forward with the patient and be real with the patient and genuine. And if you make a mistake in the sense of like how you, whatever transacted in your office, I don't care what it is, you make that right. You own it. Say, wow, so sorry, we forgot to get back to you. We thought we had, but we missed your message. Because they can leave a message and say, well, I didn't hear back for 2 days, 3 days, and they're hurting, or they're having a problem, or they're suffering, or they're going to the ER because their bowels are not right or something. So, we have to kind of own those things and be real with them, and they'll do the same for you, and you'll gain an alliance with them that's going to last a long time. They know that you're part of their team, and they can trust you, and they'll pay extra for that. They don't find it very often.
Right. Yep. Just be genuine, honest, trustworthy, tell them what's going on. And
as far as those that are experienced,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just summarizing the key concepts, right?
Yeah. There's all kinds. Everybody has their ideas, so they're gonna, everybody has these different ideas, but I think they're all based on those same principles. And you need to over deliver to the patient and give service. You have to care about them. They're first. They are your employer. You're the employee. They're the employer.
Right.
It's not the other way around.
Right. Well, thank you so much for 35 years of experience summarized for us. And great tips. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad to see that you're doing well in Idaho. And it's always good to see you.
Yeah, we'll connect again soon. Thanks, Natish. Appreciate it.